There is a power that lies dormant within each of us, a creative force waiting to be awakened. Potentials of mind, science barely understands. Harnessing the energies of consciousness is the next chapter in human evolution. Join us as we explore the secrets of mind and the technology and people behind the revolution. This is the Mind Warrior Project. This is Zygon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Mind Warrior podcast. I'm Rob Hopping. In this episode of our weekly podcast, Dane and I are going to talk about remote viewing, what it is, how it works, and how the technology connects to the universe of consciousness. Dane, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
You've been involved with remote viewing, or I should say technical remote viewing, for a very long time. Talk about what you've been doing with the technology over these last 20 years.
Sure. Technical remote viewing, or TRV as we call it, is a skill that we train at a company I own called PSI TECH. It's a formerly top secret classified intelligence collection technology ushered out of military intelligence in the late 80s, and a company was formed called PSI TECH. So basically what it is, it's an intelligence collection tool that allows a skilled viewer to tap into the matrix, or that collective unconscious that we've been talking about, and download information that's remote in time or space. So imagine this: using a pen, paper, and a trained mind, a viewer is able to access information about any person, place, thing, or event anywhere in time or space and download information.
Wow. So the question is, how is that possible?
Well, the breakthrough occurred during the Cold War era, and it was discovered that the Soviet Union was recruiting millions of people to determine whether or not they were psychic or had psychic abilities. And they were going to use them in their military intelligence program during the Cold War to identify U.S. missile silos, to use it for other military applications. So when we caught wind of this, we said, hey, we got to do something about this.
Right.
So rather than looking at it from let's hire the best psychics in the world and see if we can tap into this sixth sense ability, is that we hired one of the leading top physicists of the time. And this occurred, by the way, at Stanford Research Institute. And then they studied a psychic process and how it actually works. They studied Ingo Swann, who was the psychic that they studied. And what they determined was that there was a very specific process that he went through to be able to accurately describe objects or describe an event or a place or a location. So what they did was they refined it into a set of protocols, and that's what we call it now, or the TRV protocols, or remote viewing protocols. And the breakthrough was that anybody, you don't have to be psychic, anybody, all human beings have this innate ability, this instinct intuition function that's never been trained before. And so by installing this set of protocols into the mind, any human being is able to do this process. It's a skill. We call it an attention management skill. So it takes a while for that reflex to be going. And in fact, we call it the psi muscle, PSI. It's the psi muscle. And it takes about 6 weeks for that reflex to be developed, but we can install the protocols over a weekend. So what they discovered was, rather than hiring psychics, we could actually train people. And that's what they did in the military. They had 5 military officers who were trained in this set of protocols. This was actually a highly coveted, top secret military operation back in the day.
So what's amazing about this is the way it was approached. In other words, assume that we could design a technology to be able to collect intelligence using these set of protocols to train someone to be able to do that.
That was the breakthrough. So the breakthrough was taking ordinary people and be able to install this set of protocols. And so you get an idea of what that is, this is not some weird meditation practice or you lay back and somehow the information comes to you, or you're doing some kind of astral projection. It has nothing to do with that. In fact, it looks like you're solving a math problem. It's a human mind, and using the kinesthetic contact of a pen on paper, and that's the training, you're able to do these weird scribbly kinds of things we call ideograms. You decode an ideogram, and you're able to grab the information, objectify it using words and sketches. And at the end of a session, which usually takes about 45 minutes, the output is going to be all these words and sketches. And by the way, the remote viewer is moving very fast.
Right.
So they're moving faster than their imagination. And that's one of the tricks to this whole game, is to be able to separate out real data from imagination. And in fact, that's why if you just hire a psychic to get the same information, they might get it. They might, the best psychics in the world might be able to get some of the information, but when are they on and when are they off? That's the difference between this very refined skill and someone that's just a natural psychic. And in fact, in a weekend, our worst students are better than the best natural psychics in the world.
Wow. And so what this skill enables someone to do is, what it sounds like, is to bypass the conscious mind and, sticking to these protocols, actually lock into a target that they're looking for.
Actually, they're bilocated. In our previous episode, we talked about the collective unconscious and the universal mind, and the fact that that the universe was this giant information field we call the matrix. So part of the protocols take the mind to a place of what we call bilocation. So half of your conscious attention is in the room with a pen, with the paper, and you're objectifying the data that's actually flowing through your mind and through your body with the kinesthetic contact on the paper. The other half of your attention is in this unconscious place, or this universal mind, or matrix as we call it, where you're there grabbing the information.
Right.
Here's the key. The theory behind this is the fact that if the universe is this giant information field, and all information, everything that's ever happened in the past, present, or future exists somehow in this gigantic records room, and it's accessible, the question is, how do you access it?
Right.
You have this very precise set of protocols, and the mind is trained where the psi apparatus, as we call it, actually the psi apparatus after you're trained gets much bigger. It's like training a muscle. So as you exercise that muscle, it gets much stronger and is able to pull down information much more reliably. But the key is being able to separate out that information from imagination, because imagination will kick in about 2 seconds. It starts making all kinds of stories out of the information and data that's worthless to a remote viewer. It's worthless to the client. We're trying to obtain highly accurate information that can be used.
So that's the critical issue right here, to accurately identify the information that you're looking for.
Well, it's a target, and there's this very precise way that the target is written. So it operates very much like a search engine. So a search engine, if you want to find something, unless you're very precise and specific about the way you term your search terms, you get this whole garbage of stuff, right?
Right.
It's exactly the same thing. So we teach our students how to queue up a target, and what they use are just what we call target reference numbers. So there's 8 digits. It's kind of like a library reference number in the matrix, so to speak. So these 8 digits are created. They're put on the target along with a target queue, and then when we give a target out to a remote viewer, they're actually in the blind. They actually don't know what the target is. They're able to access accurate information about that target,
Right.
useful information, and they in fact don't even know what the target is. All they get are those 8 TRNs, or target reference numbers.
And that's a way also to ensure with that blind target, there's really no influence.
Well, contamination from their imagination,
Right.
or there can be other influences, but that's exactly right. So we train all remote viewers to operate completely and totally in the blind. In fact, double blind. We actually teach them how to do this with those TRNs, and all they get are 8 numbers. And they're able to grab amazing amounts of information that's highly accurate just using those 8 numbers. It's actually mind-blowing.
Right.
So when somebody first starts this, most people don't believe it. They're suspicious of it. Because it sounds too outlandish to be real. And then when they do it and experience it themselves, they go, wow, So if my mind is capable of grabbing information that's remote in time and space, or in the training target example, they have a picture usually that's inside a sealed envelope, and all they get are those 8 TRNs, or target reference numbers, and they're able to describe highly accurately the picture that's inside that envelope. Now that's just a training target. So in reality, a lot of people think that's as far as we take it, and that's not the case at all. It's just to train you, and that's how you get trained. So it's, even though it's fun, if you put a picture of a Ferris wheel inside of an envelope, you add the 8 digits. They do the protocols, they do the session, and they describe basically what's in the envelope. It's a Ferris wheel, or a picture of a Ferris wheel.
Right.
Or they might even describe it as saying, oh, it's a place on Coney Island with this round object that's going in the air. Okay, well, that's a win too. That's a hit on the target.
Right.
So from an operational target standpoint, if let's say it's a military project, we're looking for the location of missile silos in the Soviet Union. If it's a law enforcement target, we're looking for evidence regarding a murder investigation, or we're looking for the location of a missing person.
Right.
Or if it's a corporate project, we're looking for what's the next big idea, the next big marketing thing that will make your company a whole lot of money.
When they started this project with the idea of the matrix, this vast reservoir of everything was accepted and believed by those who were putting this together, that were developing the protocols.
I don't think it was. I don't think they knew what they were getting into.
Really?
Psychics for years tap into something. What is the something? We know that there's some accuracy on the part of people that are using, their psychic abilities or what have you. And a lot of them think it's a gift or whatever. It's not a gift. Every single human being can do this. That's really what PSI TECH's legacy is about.
Right.
Technical remote viewing is a language for this instinct intuitive function. We're overlaying a language to be able to communicate with the matrix and access this information field. So even though it sounds astounding, but in fact, it makes sense if you're talking about a real function that's part of the human, condition. It's just has never been given a language.
Right.
And so that's basically what they learned how to do. Now, that was 35 years ago. I've actually owned the company for more than 20 years. And this is literally the same company that was ushered out of military intelligence, the same protocols, the same basic. And in fact, all the military guys worked for PSI TECH at one time. And in fact, the 4-star general that was the chairman of the board, Stubblebine, was part of that project as well. So fast forward to today, we've actually advanced those protocols substantially.
Refined them.
We've refined them, that's right. And the more people that do this, the more people that are trained to do this. We trained over 28,000 people using videotape and our online TRV University. And so the more people that do this, it's like we talked about the other day about the 100th monkey. The more people that do this, the groove into the matrix, so to speak, exists, and the more capability and the easier it gets. So the first people that did this, it was cruder, it was more difficult, the protocols were not as refined. Today, 35 years later, we can teach somebody to do this in a weekend.
It's interesting the way you put that, because now you have a path that you can now follow.
Exactly, and it's a language. So their language skills of being able to communicate with the matrix have been further and further refined. So that's that's the best part to get your mind around, is the fact that this isn't a gift. This isn't some magical power, even though it feels like it. I mean, it feels like you have a superpower when you can do this. And people are going like, are you, if you tell people about it, they're going like, are you kidding me?
Well, you did say that being a mind warrior is lonely.
It is lonely. Fortunately, it's lonely, but hey, I couldn't imagine not being in this camp.
Right.
So when you meet a fellow mind warrior, it's like, aha, there's a light in the room,
Right, exactly. So it was a top secret program in the military for years, I'm assuming.
Yeah, actually it wasn't that long. It was troubled from the beginning because the Congressional Oversight Committee that funded it didn't like it. And like all things, human egos got involved in it and that sort of thing. And so eventually, even though it was highly top secret, the program was shut down, but it still maintained its top secret status for a number of years.
So it was shut down, still top secret, but eventually the word was out. So What happened?
Well, what happened was PSI TECH was going to write a book. So you had a 4-star general and you had another officer that ushered this out of the military and created a private company. Never been done before. And I think it was because it was a 4-star general and because of the reputation of it, it was allowed.
Mm.
And so in 1995, PSI TECH was writing a book. It was called Psychic Spies. And this book was about to come out. The manuscript got leaked,
Mhm.
and that's when Nightline, ABC's Nightline show, did a major piece on it. And they invited the CIA and other officials who were part of that intelligence operation. And they explained what the program was. It was quite interesting. You can go look it up online. But what they did was they created some misinformation about it. Basically, they lied to quell the interest in it and basically tried to make it appear to the public that it didn't work because they wanted to stop it. Of course, that didn't work. It was on all the night radio shows, and people were talking about it. There's, if you go online right now, there's tons of stuff on it. I can tell you right now, I would say 80 to 90% of it is misinformation.
Mm.
It's people that have picked up on it and said, hey, I'm a remote viewer, and create a little training school or think they know what they're doing. So,
Right.
For years, PSI TECH has had to fight that, has had to try to fight, well, what's the real truth? What's the real story here?
But actually, it probably works in your favor, because once you start working with clients and you can actually prove the accuracy, the validity of the technology.
Well, yes and no. I think the big deal for us was that we didn't care.
Got it.
We really didn't care. Other than the pollution effect of having all these these were all people we trained, right?
Mhm.
And then they thought, oh, well, I can do this better. I can come up with this, or I'll create my own school. So just so the audience here understands, every single one of them out there, all of it started from PSI TECH.
Right. Because those who actually developed and worked on the program in the military started PSI TECH.
Correct. And they all worked for PSI TECH. And PSI TECH was really the beginning of that as an industry, even though our first client was the Pentagon.
Really?
Remember, in 89, during this time, was the beginning of the Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Pentagon actually hired PSI TECH to do the work, to do intelligence gathering work. And the focus was on Saddam Hussein's biological weapons program.
Interesting.
And the United Nations actually gave PSI TECH an award
Mm-hmm.
for its intelligence collection and contribution. At the time, it was a little bit of a news thing because these were so-called psychics in the military, and
Right.
they were psychic spies, and they were gathering information or intelligence on the Gulf War.
That's the way it seems to be. The general characterization is that it's some sort of a psychic talent that people have.
Yeah, we don't consider ourselves psychics.
No.
Even though we're tapping into that phenomenon. That's why we use the term psi, is the last letter in the Greek alphabet. It relates to that phenomena, or we call that psi ability, that every single human has this capability. I keep repeating that, but that's the key point that people need to understand, is that you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
This is your destiny. So imagine people having the training to be able to find out their personal future trajectory,
Mm-hmm.
or find out any information they want to find out.
How did you get involved in all this?
Well, actually, I bought the company. So remember now, my interest is mine technology.
Right.
So the company was in trouble. I had some affiliations with some people involved in the company, and I bought it 21 years ago. And so since then, we've trained 28,000 people, a number of government personnel, MI6 operatives, FBI people, a whole bunch of that.
So how do you train somebody to do this?
Well, it's a good question. It's training that's unlike anything else. You don't meditate. You don't do any kind of weird spiritual practice. It has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. So what we do is we actually take them, and without any lecture, without any conversation, we create a target, and through a guided procedure that we initiate with them, within a matter of 15 minutes, they're able to describe the target accurately.
Wow.
So in a very short time, we train them how to do what's called an ideogram, which is to produce that initial body jerk reaction to the target reference numbers. And again, that's something I can't really describe real well in this format. We basically throw them in the deep end right away. And the reason why we do that is because once they show themselves that they can do that, it's like this huge aha moment.
Right.
What, are you kidding me? There's no feeling of going like, I knew what the target was.
Mm.
In fact, it's the opposite. So literally an image or a photograph that's inside an envelope. It's a sealed envelope. They get the 8 reference numbers. That's all they get.
Right.
And through a guided process of about 10 or 15 minutes, every single person will get elements or nail it perfectly what that is. It's first time effect.
Hmm.
So that first time effect is because their mind is fresh and new. It's able to bilocate almost instantly, goes right to the matrix target site, grabs the information, and describes it.
Wow.
So that's the beginning of the training. And then from there, we go through a process of lecture, a process of doing successively more difficult targets, and we teach and we basically install the protocols.
Hmm.
So over a weekend, those protocols are installed.
Right.
However, it takes about 6 weeks before the reflex, and we call it a reflex, before that psi reflex is established. So it's a reflex much like swimming.
Hmm.
Every single human being knows how to swim, right?
Right.
Reflexively, their body knows how to do it.
Hmm.
However, to become an Olympic gold medal swimmer takes years, years and years. And what do? They practice. That's the difference between a professional remote viewer and someone that just dabbles or just wants to know whether or not they can do it or not.
Right. So I'm assuming that once the psi muscle becomes well trained, one doesn't think about it anymore. You just do it. You just don't even have to think about the protocols. You just do it.
You're right. There's no thinking involved. It's just it's more of a doing thing, and it's the process of doing. And oftentimes in the process of doing it, you're not even realizing what you're doing.
So give me some examples of the kinds of things that they can discover.
Well, as a company, a lot of the work was in law enforcement, missing persons, murder investigations. We were involved in the O.J. Simpson case, the John Benet Ramsey murder case in the 90s. We even worked on the Unabomber case.
Okay.
So a slew of investigations and enigmas and anomalous events. Now, an individual would use it for their own personal optimum trajectory.
Right.
So they would probably want to find out, where's the optimum place I should live? What's my optimum relationship? What's my optimum career? Where am I going to be a year from now? What's my mission in life?
Right.
So usually on a personal level, people use it for things that are career related, relationship related, things that deal with their personal life or solving a problem.
So I'm assuming that people would learn how to create targets.
Correct. We teach them how to make what we call a blind target pool. And so daily, let's say they pull a target out of their blind target pool, which could have something to do with them personally. It could just be a calibration or a training target, like picture of the Sphinx, let's say.
Right.
And they do the protocols and they get their data set and they perform their summary and analysis and go, wow, okay, I got this or that or the other thing.
I would also think there's a specific way that you would create your targets. So, for example, if someone wants to create their own personal target pool and they want to put in there something about a relationship or a job or a money, but there would have to be a very specific way in which they would create the targets related to those topics, correct?
Yes. As an example, let's just say you want to make money and you want to make a certain amount of money within a certain time frame.
Okay.
So you would cue the target with your name / optimum is a key search term because optimum means optimum. So you would say optimum money making activity / next year.
So the way in which you write these search terms, I'm assuming it took years to really refine it.
Well, the way that that's done is critical. And the way it was developed and refined over the years was to make it as specific as possible, using as few words. And so this new language that's being imposed upon the mind does have to be done in a certain way.
Right.
In target queuing and that whole target operational aspect, that's a huge part of the training.
So this might seem like a bit of an odd question, but are there any side effects from training?
Yes, there are some. I think the biggest side effect is the fact that you've now opened up that psi apparatus. So now what it used to be relatively closed, you've added this language, you've practiced it. So you are receiving information all the time. So other psychic phenomena will creep in. So things like precognition, things like more lucid dreaming and being able to solve problems in your dreams. The increased number of synchronicities in your life. So this does open you up in a way that's fairly intense. So for some people, it's a little too much actually because they've not been used to that, and they've never activated this part of their system, this sixth sense. So it takes a little getting used to.
Right. And this ties directly into our last podcast, which was The Universe is Consciousness. where those who are aligned with the universe basically open up that sixth sense as well.
Yeah, well, people that are remote viewers, even though they use the very rigid protocols, does this make you more psychic? Absolutely, it does.
Mm.
So even though we don't like to use the term psychic, there's phenomena that will happen in your life. You will see things, you will experience things, you will be open to things that were not necessarily there before, or you weren't perceptive of.
That's a benefit.
It is a benefit. For some people, they don't necessarily like the way that it feels. I personally think that is the destiny of human beings.
Right.
We'll eventually have children born with this capability without having to install a protocol.
They'll be born with the language, correct?
They'll be born with the language. That's exactly
Awesome.
right. And so that was part of the legacy of PSI TECH, was the more people that we trained, the more people that would have this skill installed and the ability to bilocate, the more humanity evolves. So this is actually our birthright. People don't realize this. This is, once you can do this, you're changed forever. There's not a single person that I've trained, and it's in the thousands, that their life hasn't changed permanently forever.
So if we have a population of humans that are also remote viewers, then really there are no more secrets.
There you go. What a wonderful world that would be,
right.
Especially during these times where we live in an age of deception, where deception and lies and deceit is part of the mainstream, and that's part of what the nervousness of our society is the fact that you don't know what's up.
Right.
You can't trust anything. You can't trust the news. You can't trust what you read, but you will trust what you have direct experience with.
Right. And being able to connect to the universe and be able to seek answers. And what comes back to you is the truth.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the applications.
Well, one of the big applications for a number of years when I first took over the company was we studied enigmas.
Mm-hmm.
When you first start doing this, especially when you own the company and you've got this, it's like you're a kid in a candy store. You've got this capability now to find out anything about everything, right?
Right.
And when I say enigmas, I'm talking about, investigations to anomalous events, UFOs, little green men, even though they're not green and they're not little.
Right.
But yeah, so that was one of the areas of investigation, and we've got copious amounts of research data. And a lot of people, when they come in, that's the first thing they say. They go, "Okay, let's get into the UFOs."
Right.
They want to start doing UFO targets. And what's interesting about a UFO target or something that's an anomalous event, that's actually very easy to do. It's actually one of the easiest targets. You know why?
Because there's nothing else like it.
Right, because it's so unique. In other words, the mind loves novelty. We get people that have book projects, or somebody wants to book us on a TV show or whatever. They go, "Hey, can you prove that this works?" And I go, "Well, what do you mean?" They go, "I tell you what, I'll put something on my desk, an object on my desk, and you tell me what it is." So they always try to trick you with that. What they don't realize, because they don't know anything about this, is, so let's say they put a can of Coke on their desk. That's the most difficult target you can ever do. And the reason why is because it's not unique.
There's billions of them.
There's billions of cans of Coke. And
right.
So whereas a UFO that landed in someone's backyard, that's extremely unique. And so you could be at our training class and have only had one day of training, and I'll guarantee you'll get that target.
So describe, if you would, one of your investigations that really surprised you.
Well, there's so many. I think the crop circle cases investigation, who made them and why, was certainly up there as one of the most interesting ones. Turns out they're timestamps,
really,
a marker in a perishable field that can be picked up by time travelers.
Okay.
Well, we spent a year on that, and we wrote a book on it as part of our Omega series. The 9/11 stuff, the mystery around it, was pretty intense, and who was really behind the takedown of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we worked a number of terrorism cases around then involving threat assessments, involving radiological weapons and future attacks and that sort of thing. Some high-profile legal cases where we optimized strategy for a client. And a lot of projects dealing with investments for famous and interesting people that want to optimize their portfolios, especially during the latest crypto craze. And I would say probably the most interesting project right now, or in this recently was the COVID-19 pandemic, and whether the virus was actually engineered in a lab or not, or whether it was a natural occurring event. Turns out it was engineered.
Interesting.
And then the follow-up to that is the vaccine and the outcome of folks taking the vaccine, which is an experimental gene therapy, and could have a great deal of promise for, future cancer cures and other things, but it could also be a disaster. So we did a full workup on that, and probably we could do a whole podcast just talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then a project that just landed on my desk this week is a follow-up to something we began working on 15 years ago, which involves a form of time travel. We call it Project Look Back, and our client wants to know if he's able to send a message to himself back in time.
Wow.
Specifically, he wants to see if it's possible to tell himself in the past whether or not to make a certain investment or trade. We know from our past work that such a thing is possible, but we never worked out the specific mechanics of how to do it. So this is probably a very difficult one, and we'll see how it goes.
So using the technology to know how to send a message back in time. Wow.
Right.
So as humans, we're limited to the words we can use to describe something. I mean, we're limited in how we can actually describe the data, correct?
We are. That is one of the limitations. So a couple of the limitations, this is not perfect. This is embryonic. So you're right. We're limited by language. And so the greater remote viewer's thesaurus is, the more capable they are of being able to create a descriptive summary and analysis of what the target was and what the meaning of the target is.
So bottom line, though, would you say that it is a benefit to have a broader vocabulary?
It is. So generally speaking, even though anybody is trainable, those that are above average intelligence, that have a thesaurus that's well intact, are going to do better. So let's say, for example, we're trying to find a technology gap for a company.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just on the brink of being able to invent something that's revolutionary and new.
Right.
Even though we can use our standard remote viewers for that, if we have someone that has some scientific knowledge, they're going to do much better.
Got it. What about life experience? People, let's say maybe a little bit older, that have had a very rich set of life experiences, do they have an advantage over, say, a younger person that hasn't?
That's actually an interesting question. Younger people have some advantage, and I'll tell you why. It's because their minds haven't got all that paradigm.
Right.
And so young people are actually very good remote viewers. It doesn't really matter age. A person can be very old and still being able to do this. So that isn't really an impediment necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only really impediment would be in training blind people.
Right.
Because there's a visual aspect to this. I have trained a couple of blind people, and we figured out a way to do that. But for the most part, that's the only limitation.
Without that sense, obviously they can still learn the protocols, but then actually putting them into practice seems to be would be the challenge.
Well, realize we're using words and sketches
Right.
to objectify the data. So we're pulling, this data is coming down at light speed, and we're actually slowing it down. So the protocols in the mind are slowing the data down and kind of parsing it into these chunks of words and sketches. So you need to be able to do that.
Got
So
it.
you need to be able to, and it's the kinesthetic contact of the pen on the paper which triggers that action. That's what we train you to do. It in and of itself is not complex. The problem that people have is that you have to train over and over and over again, and it's a tremendous amount of work. So you have to be committed to want to do this.
Got it. Because really the first step is to receive the data and put it on paper. At that point, do you actually come to conclusions, or are you still just describing?
Well, here's what we do. So let me give you an example of a project. So when PSI TECH first came out of the military, one of the first corporate projects we did was working for one of the top 3 automobile companies. They wanted to know what the next big thing was, the next big technological breakthrough was. And so we did the work. And it happened to be that the next big thing was GPS.
Mm-hmm.
And GPS back then wasn't available to consumers. It was a military project. It was a military satellite and what have you. And so we got that, and they thought, oh, wow, that's quite interesting. So you have a number of remote viewers doing that in the blind. They're pulling down the information, and at the end of the process is an analyst who then takes the information and puts it all together. And it's like putting a puzzle together. They put those pieces and they go, here is the analysis and here's the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So the analysis might have read not more than a paragraph, but the paragraph was, at some point in the future, cars will have this global positioning system software and hardware built into it so they can find their way around wherever they go.
There's so much to this that just is mind-boggling.
Yeah, what people mostly want to know, so a lot of the people listening to this are going, well, yeah, but how do I use that in my life? Well, most people want to know what their trajectory is.
Right.
They want to know what their future looks like. What is optimum for them? And so the future is this very interesting thing. And the future, so people say, well, is there destiny, Dane? Is the future fixed? And the answer is no, it's not. The future is mutable. However, some things are fixed. Some things, it's very interesting how it works, but it looks like there's some people that do have a destiny. And that almost no matter what they try to do, they keep falling in that groove of whatever that particular destiny is. Not many, but some people appear to have a destiny. So probably the most useful thing for individuals is to be able to use this tool to be able to find their personal optimum trajectory. And that's what we call it. And it's an OT, or an optimum trajectory, meaning what is the optimum path that they should take on any one particular thing. Optimum means optimum. And so generally what that means is this is the most fulfilling thing that they can do.
Got it. So how would you access someone's optimum trajectory in the matrix?
Well, in the matrix, you have a book.
Really?
You, Rob, you have a book in the matrix. There's a book on Rob.
Wow.
So when a remote viewer uses your name and cues the target correctly, we're going to the book on Rob that's in the matrix. We're pulling down that book and we're going and looking at different chapters of that book in time. And so we can grab any historical event of your life. We can also go forward in time, because like what we described in the last podcast, there is no time.
Right.
There was time is our own third dimensional reality construct. Every single human being is an event in that universe with a book, and time is irrelevant. So we can grab a future chapter of Rob in that book and pull it down. All the possibilities, all the future trajectories, all of that's accessible.
So what you're saying is I can find information about anything at any time. So today I want to know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yes. No, let's even make it more specific. Let's say you have a presentation you're making tomorrow and you want to find out the optimum way of making that presentation so it's successful. You can do that target and not only determine what the outcome or receive data about what the best way to make your presentation is, but you're right. You can fast forward a year from now and look at the outcomes of that project.
Got it. How long does it take to do a session?
45 minutes generally.
Okay.
So we limit the sessions to 45 minutes. Doesn't mean you wouldn't do multiple sessions if that project is important, or you're looking for other data, or you're looking to embellish or find out more information. You might on a lot of these have to do multiple sessions, but we limit a session to 45 minutes.
Got it. Okay. Are there any physical requirements? I mean, I'm assuming that your physical condition at any given time will affect how you perform.
Yeah, there's some limitations. Like, for example, you probably should not have taken any drugs or alcohol. You should not be hungry. Hunger is one of those things where we call it what's called a personal inclemency, and we declare our personal inclemencies before we start the session so we can get rid of them.
Oh.
The rest of it you can do. It doesn't matter what your other physical inclemencies are, you can still do this.
Got it. So let's talk about a unique application where you've used the technology.
If you focus on the financial markets and you can prove that it works, people will be very interested in that. So I began an experiment and I created a company called Stock Jumpers. And basically what we do at that company is we focused on catalyst trading events,
Okay.
like earnings reporting companies. And the reason we do that is because even though we've used this for other financial investments and people's portfolios, and What's interesting about a catalyst market event, like an earnings report, is that it happens at one, you can identify exactly what the time is, and the stock will either go up or it will go down based upon the earnings report. Technically, it's impossible to know what the company's, unless you're an inside trader, it's impossible to know what the company's earnings report is going to be. In other words, did they beat on earnings? Did they miss on earnings? And so I thought that was a good way to be able to prove out the remote viewing capability, because that was a catalyst event that we're able to focus on.
And a catalyst event is really almost like looking at an anomaly, right?
Well, it is in the sense that there's some catalyst or reason to move the market, right? And in this case, it's the company, a large company, a public company is going to report their earnings. There's a lot of people focused on it because there's a lot of people that have either are going to buy that stock or they're going to sell that stock based upon what the company reports. So you're right. It's a bigger event than just remote viewing the general stock market, which is actually very difficult. One of the limitations of remote viewing is that we can't get numbers.
Okay.
The information is downloaded as concepts, as abstraction words, information sketches. We don't get specific numbers. So if you were to say, "Hey, I want you to remote view my house address," I can't do that.
Why is that?
Because numbers are insignificant in the matrix. Remember, we talked earlier about the novelty of information, how the mind loves novelty and it grabs novelty. And that's why a catalyst event is novel. It's something that exists in time that we can identify when it's going to exist before we remote view it, and we can grab it. So it's the ability to have what we call a spike, or a big enough of a signal line where the mind can grab it. And so some things, have a signal line and have that spike in the matrix so we can grab, and other things don't.
If it's a big move, what you'll be able to know is if it's a big move up or a big move down, correct?
Right. We'll grab the move. What we're really looking for, and we've simplified the protocols to do this, is the binary decision. Is it going to go up or is it going to go down?
So a simple yes or no, black or white, buy or sell.
Correct. And so then a trader would be able to enter in that market and make a market decision of going buy or sell, let's say 5 minutes before market closes on the day they're going to report.
So what does that data look like? Let's say there's a big move up. What do you receive? What goes down on a piece of paper?
Well, what goes down on the piece of paper, and so we're talking about a 45-minute session. Several remote viewers are doing this. So some of them are going to get all kinds of extraneous information and data. Most of them end up drawing a chart. They have a line, like a mid-place line where they start, and what they're looking for is, does that line go up or does the line go down below the baseline?
Wow. So if you can do this with the markets, I'm assuming you can also do this with, say, sports.
Yeah, sports betting. That's right. We can. And we've done the Super Bowl every year for the last, 25 years successfully. That's an easy one because, again, we talked about the spike in the matrix. That's a big spike. There's a lot of people watching it. It's a big event. There's a lot of richness to the signal line. So we always end up doing the Super Bowl. But yeah, sports betting in general, pretty much any sports activity, the outcome can be known in advance. So I know everyone's hearing this and going, "Wow, hey, I want to do that. Hey, why can't?" Well, you can do it. You could be actually trained to do that. It's a little bit different of a protocol. Again, each of these have different nuances to them. But to answer your question about this particular kind of event and be able to grab the outcomes, it's easier than doing the stock market.
Oh, wow.
So in stock market, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, sometimes it doesn't actually always behave the way you want it to, because the stock market's not binary necessarily. But all sports is, other than soccer, where there's a tie, this is a binary decision. One of those teams is going to win.
So as an individual, I just want to learn that skill, and I have like these 5 or 6 different issues that I want to really keep tabs on. I want to know what's going on. There's a real benefit.
There is. I think people come to us and train for different reasons, but I would say the vast majority of them, it's to really define what they should be doing with their life that's the most fulfilling. And remember now, fulfillment doesn't necessarily mean the most money.
Right.
So when we do someone's optimum trajectory in the future, and we've gotten some very strange things, like someone should be building tree houses for a living. Someone should go into the salt business. I mean, all these thousands of stories of people whose lives they either had an inkling or had a pull to do that, or they may never have had a pull, and all of a sudden it opens up a whole new doorway of possibilities. But realize this: fulfillment doesn't necessarily mean money. So a target on what is the optimum money making activity is a very different target than, let's say, optimum trajectory, my future.
So this brings up to me an interesting question about destiny and free will. Do we all have destinies? I mean, if the book is written on Rob, so I should be able to go into that book and see Rob 20 years from now.
And actually you can. And it's a trajectory. That's what we call the future's a very funny business. And so, and we spend a lot of time in the future. So we've had to actually kind of learn how it all works. And the future is made up of trajectories. So here's an example of a destiny that's going to happen. A volcano is going to erupt,
Okay.
right? It's going to happen. In other words, a mountain at some point is going to erupt. It could be 1,000 years, could be 10,000 years from now. That is a destined event that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
With a person could have many trajectories. They could have a negative trajectory, they could have their current trajectory, and then they could have their optimum trajectory. What's interesting about optimum trajectories is that once you fall into it, it's like things just start happening and lining up. So it's like people go, okay, Dane, you can describe my optimum trajectory, but how do I know when I'm on it? And the answer is you'll know,
right.
Because when you're on it, it's like a train going down the track. You're on the track now. It's going to the next station, and the people that you need in your life will be there. So it's like the things, the events, the people, the places, all of that when you're on that trajectory will just start lining up, and let's put it this way, things aren't necessarily easier, because fulfillment in life isn't about having life be easy.
Right.
It's not. And so things that you still have challenges and what have you, but it's that optimum trajectory is the happiest you'll be, the most fulfilled you'll be. And I think that's where people really place their attention on. Again, it's not the same thing as my optimum career or my optimum money-making opportunities. You'll get different data.
Where does free will fall into this?
Well, that's a good question, because that was a topic of mine that I was very interested in. I actually have been interested in my whole life. In other words, I always wanted to know, as you know, I'm interested in the purpose of the universe, and also whether or not I have free will.
Right.
Or whether or not I have to follow a certain pattern or path, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we looked at that. So I looked at that as what we call that a topical target. So it's not a target about a person or a place or a thing. It's a target about a topic. So it was very interesting. I actually spent months working it myself, and it gets into some heavy duty spiritual stuff. But basically, we all humans have free will within a construct of destiny, if that makes any sense. In other words, we're allowed to have free will, or the belief that we have free will, and we're allowed to act within the confines of that free will, but we're granted permission.
That's what Einstein believed. He believed in destiny, but he also believed in free will. So the destiny can be altered. So your path can be changed by your free will, but what he believed was one acts in their own self-interest. So your free will contribute to your path to destiny.
Yes, basically, yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. And it's the word that was the most interesting to me, and it gives me goosebumps, was permission. You're granted permission to have free will. I'm like, what? That's not free will if you're granted permission, right? But it is. In other words, within our functioning within this greater matrix, we think we have free will. And to some extent we do. But it's within a larger envelope of destiny. And some of us have really more preordained lives that we have to kind of follow a path. And when we get off the track, it's almost like the universe beats you up. You You have to kind of, people know what I'm talking about that have had that happen to them. It's almost like, well, wait a second, I went off on that tangent. It not only didn't work out, I got kind of beat up. And as soon as I get back on the track that I'm supposed to be on, life seems to unfold in a proper way.
I think we've all experienced that. We know exactly what that means. So during your sessions or during that work, you got that word, the actual word permission?
Permission. We're granted permission.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was like, it blew my mind.
But it does go to the belief in the fifth force in the universe.
We're babies. We've just barely crawled out of the trees, and we're still trying to figure things out. We're an endearing species. I think human beings have tremendous potential that we just barely tapped into. And this area, this whole psi functioning thing, is one of those areas that once we start going down this path and realizing what we're capable of, this opens up the profound implications about not only the power of mind, but our human destiny and where we're going. What's this all about? It's not about acquiring stuff. It's not about getting a bigger or better house. It's not. And so once we learn our role in the universe, I think everything will change.
Right. Let's talk about the Trv Training Program that's in the works.
Okay. Well, we actually have TRV University that's been going for the last 20 years. And we shut it down this last year because we're going to be adding to it and updating it.
Okay.
So we're going to be offering through the Zygon app remote viewing training. Mm-hmm. And in the interim, I'll be publishing an audio book here shortly called "I See the Future," which is about the remote viewing training and some of the projects I've worked on, and it should be some interesting stuff. But that's not going to be a training course. So the training course will probably be offered this summer through the Zygon app.
And this is a big deal. I mean, this is huge. And just as becoming a part of the Zygon app, and then bringing our members into it and giving them the opportunity to train in TRV is amazing.
And I don't think people really realize now, even though the app's only been out there for a short period of time, but we really have two companies. The sister company is called PSI TECH, PSI TECH. Mm-hmm. And so even though PSI TECH has its training arm, we shut that down and are retooling it, and that's what will be offered through the Zygon app.
Dane, let's wrap this up. Thank you for spending time discussing this amazing technology. And for a lot of people, they've never heard of it before. So here is an opportunity to discover tactical remote viewing, what it is, how it works. And you gave us a great overview of it from the history to where we are right now. And I'm excited for the new training program.
Yeah, I think that if people realize that they can do this and they experience it firsthand, it opens up a whole new framework of what their relationship is to the universe. And I think that's really the big aha moment, was that, wow, if my mind is able to access information that's accurate using this methodology, what are the implications? What does that mean in terms of how the universe really works?
Exactly. Well, Dane, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast. So until next time, enjoy your journey.
There is a power that lies dormant within each of us, a creative force waiting to be awakened. Potentials of mind, science barely understands. Harnessing the energies of consciousness is the next chapter in human evolution. Join us as we explore the secrets of mind and the technology and people behind the revolution. This is the Mind Warrior Project. This is Zygon.